or second episode in the series book, which is the third book in my series, titled All Apologies, Life Beyond Silence. And that's the series, Life Beyond Silence. The book is titled All Apologies, Guilt and Blame. This is my third podcast. This is my second episode. Please bear with me. I'm not a podcaster. I just felt like I started my podcast on the different books in my series so that I could further explain and offer more details than what I had originally put down in writing so many years ago. So, like I said, this is the second episode, and All Apologies basically is a book where I'm trying to go back into my first book, even my second book, and explain and further offer information on what all happened and how I got to where I am now. I had a very dysfunctional childhood. I've been to therapy, and it's funny because when I first started going to therapy, I just was like, let's talk about my stress that I'm under, because I was having medical problems with my heart, and it was overwhelming me. And the therapist wanted to know more about my childhood, my family, my life, etc. And I didn't want to talk about it. I told her I wrote a book a long time ago. The book's called Not a Victim, a Survivor, Life Beyond Domestic Violence and Rape. I said, if you want to know about my childhood and my first part of my life, read that. If you want to know about further parts of my life, read my second book in the series, which is titled Losing Touch with Reality. And I told her that, I still intended on finishing up my books enough that I could publish them on Amazon, because I had the first one on Amazon, even though it was published a long time ago. It seemed like the most updated way to do things, because most people were interested in ebooks and not actual manuscripts or paperback. So I started doing that, and I had YouTube channels that were up. One is now I gotta think of my movie channel, but it's like TV and movies that you can trust. TV and movie reviews that you can trust. And there's another one, it's like de-stressing and relaxation. And both of those channels are doing well on YouTube, and I got to thinking, maybe I'll do a podcast on my books, and it would give me an avenue that I could do podcasts on the books, all three books in the series Life Beyond Silence, And I could do that and give listeners a way to actually ask me or make comments about my life, basically, and about the mistakes I made. And for the most part, people are really nice. I've gotten several comments. All of them have been good. Um, a lot of them have been focused on giving me encouragement to continue with the podcast. And so this is episode 2. And it's my 3rd book. All apologies. And I guess it would be good to start with my childhood and say, I realized right off the bat when I was a young girl that having a baby at 16, which is how old my mom was, couldn't have been the most blessed part of her life. It was probably hard for her. I wrote about it in the first book, and I do think it was extremely hard for her. She could have done so much with her life and instead had me. And maybe some of the bitterness and the dysfunction between me and my mother, maybe some of that is because she I guess I won't say regrets, but I think she harbors feelings about how I disrupted her life. And for that, I will, I guess, start off with me taking blame or guilt or whatever for that, even though I had no ability as an infant to change the fact that I was born. And I know that. And I think most of the apology that I have for that is based on the fact that I know it couldn't have been easy. I'm a grown woman and I'm older now. And my mom is only 16 years older than me, and I know that it couldn't have been easy, especially raising me because I was not the best kid. I can remember when I was little that, you know, kids are kids, and I had a wonderful grandfather. He was truly wonderful in my eyes, and I know I meant a lot to him. But I remember I wasn't the best kid. You know, kids will be kids. I even tried to light candles when I was like, I don't know, 8 maybe. And I almost burnt the house down. It wasn't like terribly bad, but of course it was bad enough. I can imagine if a little kid, whether it's anybody else's or even my own, goes to start lighting candles and they drop the flame and it lights the rug on fire. I remember when it happened, I literally threw a throw on top of it and jumped up and down to put out the fire. I mean, it's not like I didn't know, oh my God, there's a fire, do something. And I did. Luckily, maybe I was that smart, maybe, to do that. Because if I hadn't have done that and I had run away from the flame, it would have continued to burn and maybe possibly burn the trailer down with me in it. But I was alone. My mom was at work. And I used to come home from school and let myself in. We had a trailer at the time. But soon after, we built a home. We built a home when I was like 9, maybe 10. And, or my dad and mom built a home. I didn't build it personally. But I was like 10. And my sister had just been born. And I don't think she was planned either in any way. But I remember when she was born, my mother was irritated and my dad was also irritated, and it wasn't like a warm, um, welcomed addition to our little family. And I remember how trying everything was. But like I said, they built a home and we moved into it when I would say 10. And I remember, like I said, I wasn't the best kid. I seemed to get in trouble every turn, especially once I got to be a teenager. But I guess the most, I mean, I know that when I was young, there was always issues, but it was kind of like I just took them in. I just watched from afar how my mother or how my father acted. My father had a small, well, it wasn't small, but he had a boating business. When I was very, very little, my father was into cars, and then by the time I was like 10 years old, maybe a little older than that, started, he always did mechanics, but he started a boating business. And my mother worked at a factory for years, but so did almost everybody else in town. Our town had a couple of factories that basically everybody worked at. And my dad was a heavy equipment operator, and just from watching from afar, I know that he worked at several um, operations around the tri-state, and he drove quite a distance to and from work. And when he did start the boating business, it was a sideline business because he still worked heavy equipment. And most of the money that my family had came from his um, employment. And of course, my mom's employment also helped with our finances, from what I knew or from what I understood. That's basically all I knew. I didn't know when I was young. I had no idea when I was young that my family had any kind of real wealth. Um, I couldn't have ever known that. especially when I was young. Like I said, we lived in a trailer for quite a while. But, um, you know, the the money that my family had was pretty middle class, upper middle maybe. I just didn't know that for years until I got older. But then I started, looking at the small town that I come from and my mom and dad's um, name, I guess you would say, within the town. Most of the people knew us. We were, um, my mom and dad mainly was well known in the town. Um, they both had grown up, basically. Um, my dad had plenty of friends and boating people that we knew, and um, cars and mechanics, and it was, he was well known. And my mother, working at the factory for all those years, she also was well known in the town. I remember when I went to high school, there was a teacher. Now, let me just say, everything that happened to me when I was young, it's hard to deal with or hard to talk about, however you want to list it. There were people that my dad knew that made, uh, I would say one person in particular that made an advance on me when I was young. And I shrugged it off as, you know, most people maybe would have gone running to their family, which I did not think I could do. But looking back at it now, it was something that should have been reported, but I didn't. And it was basically in my opinion, no harm to me. It was just a dirty old man in my eyes at that time. And then when it came to the teacher, that was another thing that should have been reported, but I also waved that off as just a dirty old man who once upon a time had eyes for my mother and took liberties to point out that I was like my mother in many ways and was pretty and was enticing, I guess you would say. Looking back, I don't even acknowledge any of that. I remember it. My therapist pointed it out that, you know, it may, in my eyes, have done no harm, but it still was significant, I guess you would say. Um, I remember when I went to my therapist, I told her, "You're overreaching, I guess, because I do take blame and guilt for a lot of things in my childhood, especially, like I said, when I got to be a teen. If I was enticing or cute or expressive or danced good or did something good and somebody thought about trying to like rub up on me or whatever, I felt guilty for it. I felt, I don't know, I felt like it was normal in some way. that I was dressing a certain way or doing a certain thing. And I can remember when I was a teen, I had some perfume on in the car. And I was very young. I don't know how old I was, but I was young. And I had just started wearing makeup and perfume. And we were in the family car going somewhere. And my dad said I smelled like a whore. But I also got over that. You know, it just seemed normal at the time. You know, anything my mother said about me or how I looked or what I did also seemed normal at the time. Um, my sister pointed out that my mother used to like see me running through the house to get clothes on or whatever, and, or she would maybe make a comment when I was putting clothes on. She would make some kind of comment about a steel wool powder puff, meaning my pubic area. And looking back, like I said, I didn't think anything of it. It was kind of normal for me, normal for my life. You know, it was normal for my life, I guess. And my sister pointed out how that was done to me quite a bit, or said to me quite a bit, and I told her, you know, it is what it is. But um, no apologies needed. But you know, my mother was very pretty, and she was only 16 years older than me, and my dad was my dad. So I just never really thought about anything like being. I didn't even think about dysfunction in the family until my therapist considered how I was brought up as to be impactful in my life, I guess. I don't know. To be honest, I don't look at it that way. I look at it as that's just how things were back then. You know, I have pointed out in the earlier books that my dad was so excited when a boy that was like the boy, like the guy, because his dad was a hospital administrator and he was like the king of the seniors and all that. But he came to take me out, and my dad was like, "Oh, you have a date with him?" And I was like, "No, I don't. I don't know anything about what he's even saying about, because no, I don't." And my dad was like, you should, this is the kind of boy you should be with." And I was like, "No, I know he just wants to get in my pants." You know, I didn't say that to my dad, but I knew it. And I knew that I had I guess you would call it, as I had been labeled easy, even though I wasn't. I was, I get that through my teen years, I was a handful. And I get that I was rebellious. And I get that I was at times suicidal. And I get that I was very difficult to handle. They would tell me to go right. I'd go left just because that's I didn't want to go right. They wanted me to do certain things, and I can't tell you why I rebelled, but I just did. But that didn't make me easy. I think during my teenage years, I was just seeking love and attention. And yeah, I was doing it all the wrong way. I was drinking. I was, going out of town to be with boys that were older than me, people that didn't know anything about me. I was doing everything wrong, but I didn't really care. I can remember not caring. I can remember kind of hoping to die, whether it was in a car wreck, by some other way. Maybe I felt like I could drink myself to death. I just didn't care. My home life was not the best, and I can remember not caring. But God had other plans, and I survived my childhood. And I don't place blame on my family, my mom and my dad, at all. I don't. I think the death of my grandfather when I was like 14 was something that impacted me the most and made me I would say made me just not want to be here anymore. I loved him with everything that I was. And when he died and my uncle died, like literally 6 months later, I lost the people that I loved the most. And I think it impacted me more than anything. And it, along with the fact that my family wasn't the most caring, I think I just didn't care. I just didn't care if I died, because if I died, I felt like, being a Christian, they would be there to, welcome me into heaven, I guess. But, like I said, God had other plans. So, I'm going to stop here for the second episode. It's hard to put into words, but I'm doing the best I can with this podcast. I'm grateful for everybody that listens. Truly grateful. And as the book is titled, All Apologies, I'm sorry for everything. I realize, even though my therapist said that, in her words, until you're an adult, you're not, if you're in a dysfunctional family, that has to impact you. And that's something you can't be guilty for. And I guess I call bullshit on that, because I do take blame and guilt for all the rebellion that I caused my family. And there's lots of times I think that if I had listened to them, or if I'd actually somehow got their attention, that maybe things would have been different for me. I remember once asking if I could go to an all girls school because I got some literature on it. And I remember asking, could I go to this all girls school and, ride horses and be around people that didn't know me and maybe excel at art or something like that. And I was, of course, shut down. And I get that. I probably would have done the same with my kids who wants their 14-year-old to go to an all girls high school that they live at and, you know, do that. Who wants that for their kid? I probably wouldn't have wanted that for any of mine if they had asked. But looking back, I think if they'd let me do that, would that have changed my life? Would I have had better opportunities, or opportunities in which got me out of my small town and away from, you know, away from things that I got in trouble for? I don't know, you know. But don't get me wrong. Even though I was rebellious and even though I did so many things, which you can definitely go back and listen to my other podcasts and hear, I get it. I wasn't the best kid. But I wasn't the worst kid. That's the thing. I wasn't. There were things said about me that were untrue, but even though I did what I did do, that didn't make me the worst kid. I I just wanted to find love, and I was trying in all the wrong places. I get that. Okay, so I'm going to end this episode, and I will be back. Thank you for listening.